farewell fans, and welcome to another great episode. Welcome to another great interview. Listen, we have a good conversation for you today. It's one of the things that I have shared on this platform many times, of things that happened in my past, things that that my mom went through, and everything. Some things that was very delicate to me. And I wanted to bring another conversation to you for awareness for a little bit of everything. You may know somebody that's going through, you may know somebody that has been through it, or you have been through it yourself. We have all dealt with trauma at some point in time. So I have Dana on the show with me today. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. And I have to tell you, I've been so looking forward to this conversation because even though I'm a champion for women typically that are coming out of abusive situations or have had abusive childhoods like I have, it's so refreshing to champion for men. Not that I don't normally, but I don't get many opportunities to do that. And so I just want to say I really, truly am grateful for this opportunity because men need some women on their side once in a while.
I do agree. I do agree. And I have known of some men that have been through abusive situations. And it's difficult to talk about it in some instances because the mindset is that as a boy, as a man, you are supposed to stand up, regardless of how old you are. You're supposed to fight back.
Yeah.
And even in those cases, when you're supposed to fight back, when you're outmatched. You know when you're going to lose. You're not going to be able to win this fight. So if you're 15 trying to fight somebody that is 40, you know you're going to lose. And then what are you supposed to have? What is the conversation supposed to be? Is that, oh well, at least I tried to fight him. You didn't even stand a chance in that fight. But before we go ahead and go into that, then can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. As I already sort of shared there, I was a victim of childhood abuse myself. And then I entered a 25-year relationship with my ex-husband. And that was also not very pleasant, domestic violence, all the good stuff. But I'm out of that. And I am now helping people, kind of realize their power and realize their potential and that we don't have to always go with the flow and go conform to what society and what people say is supposed to be. I think it's important for us to follow what's truly in our hearts, male or female. No matter if you're 15 or 50, we have to know what's true and right in our own hearts and go with that because, again, that's something we related on was, having these abusive stepfathers that, what do you do? I had child services involved. I had authorities involved, but nobody believed me. They outsmarted me. And what do you do? What you do is you pay the consequences for speaking the truth. And victims are too often silenced. So I have dedicated my life. I'm on a mission to be that voice for people that can't or aren't safe enough to speak their minds. So I'm glad to be here again. I really appreciate this.
Now, when we had talked previously, we kind of had that I want to say bond because it doesn't, but we kind of had that reminiscence of knowing what it's like to be a child and going through that type of abuse, and when we had the conversation, I was like, you know what, I definitely want to talk to you because I feel like we had some things to talk about
Yeah.
and we had some things to share and to inform other people of some of the things that has occurred or that could occur and just some things that's just out there. And so one of the first questions I have for you is, what was the moment you realized your relationship with your stepfather wasn't just hard, but it was abusive?
Well, that's a funny question because actually my second book is about my childhood. And usually by about the second or third chapter, people can't read past that. It was the first time I met him, my stepfather. I was 3 years old. My mother was taking me on a date, that she had with him. And back then, you didn't need to put your kid in a car seat or anything. I was right in the front seat of his little two-door coupe, whatever, on her lap. And I think it was fall or spring, but either way, it wasn't too bad outside Chicago. The window was rolled half down, and I remember having my fingers kind of holding on the edges of the window, peering out, just looking at everything in the city as we were driving by. And we were sitting at a stoplight, and he became very upset that my fingers were touching the precious glass of his sports car. And he rolled the windows up and crushed my fingers in that glass. And my mother said nothing. She weakly said his name, but not with any emphasis that he was doing anything wrong. I was the one that was shamed. I shouldn't have been touching it, and I should listen better, and literally from that moment, I was about done, and I was 3 years old, and I had to proceed with the rest of my life. We have no contact now, but it's a very hard thing to have that be the premise, the beginning, the foundation of what would be, the male role model that my mother put us in this life situation with. So it was not good. I knew right from the get-go, and everything that followed just resonated. It did not feel right. And yes, I was a precocious little kid. And yes, I'm a little more sensitive, so to speak, or maybe I'm an empath or something. But there was always this knowing that my uncles don't treat me this way. My cousins don't treat any man in my life did not treat me this way. Even my alcoholic grandfather didn't treat me that way. So I knew this was wrong.
So, in relation to that, from that experience and experiences thereafter, what do you believe? What effect do you think that had on your life going forward, or as an adult now?
It had a huge impact. And there's so much to tell about it, but the basic aspect is that it showed me, I mean, I was a child, I was a toddler essentially, but growing up, I was seeing that this is what the male, the father figure in the family, this was his role. This was the way he was allowed to treat his, let's say, wife and his children, so to speak, because I saw the way he was very controlling with my mother, very possessive. And as far as I went, I was not to speak my mind. Like I said, I was a very precocious child. I stood up for what was right, and it didn't matter how tiny I was. I said what I had to say, and I was punished for that. And so what all of this said to me was that I'm bad, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me. But the problem with my situation specifically was that on a daily basis, daily, my stepfather would actually say the words. He would tell me nobody ever wanted me. He told me my mother didn't love me. He told me that the reason my biological father wasn't around because he didn't want me either. He told me that he shouldn't have to pay for another man's child, that I shouldn't have even been born, and that I shouldn't exist. And follow that with, I didn't have a bed for how many years. He didn't see fit to pay for this or that for me because I wasn't his child. So yeah, you put that all together. What does that make a girl believe? A little girl. And I want people to think about this. We all have a little girl, whether it's a neighbor, a daughter of our own, a niece. Think of a 3, 4, 5-year-old little girl saying those things. And I was hearing it still at 15. What did that say to me? That said, nobody's ever going to love me because I'm not lovable. And I'm not lovable because I am not his biological child. And apparently I wasn't lovable because I was made to believe that my biological father wasn't even around because he didn't want me. It's a very hard thing to think that I was even called, I was referred to as a mistake and an accident. So yes, I grew up, I had suicidal ideation, I was depressed, I was anxious all the way through adulthood. And it's no wonder I ended up in a 25-year relationship with my ex-husband that just basically perpetuated that pattern and that behavior because I thought that I didn't deserve better.
And some of the things that you're saying resonates with me in a way because some similar things were said to me. I didn't run into my mom's into my stepdad until I was like 12, 13.
Mm.
And in that time frame, we had everything was okay. Okay. And I walked into an environment where they wanted me to do chores and everything, and I wasn't as rebellious. It was just more so I just it wasn't something that I was used to. I primarily lived with my grandma, my auntie, my mom, and a few of my cousins. We was all in one household for
Mhm.
majority of my life. And when we moved to this apartment, it was like, okay, now it's a whole new set of rules. It's a whole new set of things you got to do, and it's like it's not even an ease in to it. It's just like, okay, now we got all this furniture, we got all these mirrors. Okay, now you have chores. What's a chore? Like I've never had to do chores. The most I did was go outside, come home to eat, and go back outside. That's what we did as kids. So now you're saying that I have been brought over here to do chores like manual labor. I just was with it, and you could say I was rebellious. Okay, let's say I was being rebellious or whatnot. And the initiative was that, oh well, well, the incentive was that you can do this and we'll pay you an allowance. And I'm like, for all these years, been getting an allowance for free. Now I move into this new space. Now I actually have to work for the for the allowance. It was a different change of speed. And was any of this stuff explained to me in a way to say, okay, we know that you used to do this over here, but because now that we over here, we don't have the same support. My grandma, my auntie used to clean up a little bit. My aunties used to clean up a little bit. Now the cleaning up is on us. The conversation was never had to institute to tell me what these changes was going to be and what was going to come, what responsibilities I was going to have to start to take on in this new space. And then from there, I remember our conversation. My SATs had came out, my ACTs had came out, and they wasn't even standard. They wasn't even on the highest level. They weren't even the highest percentiles. Okay, and all I can remember is being called stupid. And hey, I remember mine was on this top level, and look where yours is at. And at the time it didn't even dawn on me that you're telling me this, but it's not. But you're not rich. You're not
Right.
driving this expensive car. You're not a CEO of the organization, but you have these high SAT scores. You have these high ACT scores that were so much better than mine. But I'm the one being belittled because you don't feel like I'm on your level of intellect or anything like that. And from the emotional and verbal abuse, then came the physical abuse because I didn't do this, or I wasn't accepting of that. And because me and my siblings have different fathers, that was another different kind of dynamic relation right there. Because just like in your situation, the comments going towards your father and everything. My dad bought me a nice outfit. This was back when Guess was really popular, and they was wearing a whole jean outfit. Because you had a whole jean outfit, you was the coolest person in the room.
Yes, you
Because
were.
everybody didn't have jean outfits now. Brought me this all black jean outfit. And I went ahead and, I brought it in the house. I put it up. It was looking nice and everything. And, my mom had asked me, like, well, where you get that from? I was like, my dad bought it for me and everything. And did I put this outfit on a pedestal above all my other clothes in the closet? Not really, but it was a Guess outfit and everybody liked Guess. I mean, and it wasn't a cheap Guess outfit. Like, it was expensive. Like, at that time, like right now, we look at $150 and be like, okay, it's $150. But back then, $150,
Yeah.
you didn't spend $150 on an outfit and just be like, okay. So spent $150 on that outfit, and I was gonna wear it to school and everything. Had an iron press and everything, and I was made to feel bad about it because it was saying that, well, all your dad is good for is buying you this outfit right here and so forth. And I just kind of just sat there and I felt so bad that I didn't even wear the outfit, and I end up taking it back to the mall and getting the money done and getting the money back. And and my dad asked me about it. He said, "Well, did you wear the outfit?" I said, "Nah." He like, "Well, what did you do?" I took it back. He's like, "Well, why'd you take it back?" I'm like, and I didn't tell him what happened. I was just like, I needed the money, so I just took it back and everything. But I felt so bad because they made me feel like, my dad was he was trying to win me over by buying stuff. And I can't remember the conversation me and my dad had, whether I asked him for it or if he wanted to get it for me. But I do remember we was at the mall and he ended up getting me the outfit. And he also told me some other things that I wasn't aware of that didn't really make the situation for me any better. As we proceeded through the years, it actually made the situations a lot worse. And just like in your situation, yes, did I become suicidal? I did. I had suicidal thoughts. I started drinking at an early age. I started smoking at an early age. I started doing everything that a 12, 13, 14-year-old in some situations wouldn't consider. It wouldn't be on a radar, unless they were going through such a trauma that it invokes their mind to think that, okay, then why am I here? What is my purpose
Absolutely.
of being here if I receive this type of hate? And then being told, well, if you tell anybody that I'm doing or saying this, I'll kill you and your family. Or let me, we can't say that. Unalive you and your family. Just imagine being a 13-year-old and hearing that, and you have the visuals in your head that you're the last one left and you have nobody. Like, at what point in time do you speak up and say, hey, this was said something to me, but all y'all gonna disappear if I tell y'all, or if I tell somebody, all of y'all gonna disappear.
Well, we also have to consider the time. We grew up in a time where you didn't talk about stuff like that. What happened behind closed doors was to stay behind closed doors. Because I
Right.
would try telling my great grandma who I could confide in, and she'd always put her finger up to her lips. I wasn't supposed to talk about that. Just respect your mother's decision to marry this man. But I relate to so much of what you said, and what that all amounts to is shame. It amounts to shame. That's the name of my second book, Choking on Shame. It's about my childhood because I was literally choking on my mother, shaming me for everything. Because like you, I was made fun of. I was bullied at school. I was bullied at home. Then the physical abuse, and it didn't matter. It was how I talked because I rolled my R's, and my mother would say, "Stop rolling your R's. Nobody needs to know we're Puerto Rican." So I would practice in front of the mirror talking like the Caucasian kids in the suburb that, we were moved to when she moved in with, my stepfather, or when we did. And it was putting me in Gap clothes because I couldn't wear the frilly little Puerto Rican dresses that my grandma would send for me to wear, because then people would know, and they're not supposed to know that I'm not this man's daughter. Nobody can know we're Hispanic, all the stuff. And it's like, so I can't be who I am. And that's a lot to do to a kid, just like everything that you were burdened with. Of course, you were rebellious. Of course, you were doing things. You were trying to escape the trauma of what you were going through. And I did too. I never smoked anything. I never did drugs or any of that, but I started looking for love with the boys. When I got to about the same age, like 12, I wanted the boys' attention, because if I couldn't get love from my parents at home, then maybe I could get a boy to like me. And maybe if a boy was affectionate with me and I give him what he wants, if you know what I mean, then maybe I'll be loved for that. Maybe somebody will want me. Somebody will find some value or worth in me. And it's kind of sick to me, coming from a female standpoint, that I thought that I had to, go the route of sexuality to be validated and to feel worthy of love. It's so sad. And it's something that it took up into my 40s to undo.
Yeah. Um, I was before we move we move on. I feel like this is a very deep conversation.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: how did being kept from your biological father shape your understanding of fatherhood, love, and protection?
Mhm. That's a big one. The thing that comes to mind to answer that is I have a friend who's an African missionary priest, and a few years ago he asked me he said, when you pray, who do you pray to? Do you pray to God? Do you pray to Jesus? Or do you pray to Mary? I said, oh, I've always prayed to the Virgin Mary my whole life. I'm a good little Catholic girl. I always pray to the Virgin Mary. He says, that's interesting. He says, that's because you never had a man in your life, a father figure, a brother figure that you could count on, that you trusted to look up to. And I thought, well, that would be accurate because obviously it wasn't my stepfather. And all my childhood, I would ask questions about my biological father and I was shushed. I was told not to ask about him. I didn't need to know about him. But then I would hear things, or my mother would every once in a while say things, um, and they weren't nice. You know, she would say all kinds of derogatory things, but of course, to this day, she says she never said a bad thing about him. But um, it made me feel very deficient. It compounded with the verbal abuse I was getting from the stepfather. It again goes back to it shaped my idea about who I was, which was nothing. I was nothing. I was worthless. I had no value to anybody. Um, but the thing is, I think it's interesting when we become teenagers, I was trying to make sense of who I was and where I fit into this world. I think it's a teenage thing that we go through.
Yeah.
And I actually did end up finding my real dad. He lived 3 miles away from me my whole life, and we met. And the crazy thing is, the second that we shared maybe 2 or 3 sentences, I immediately felt like I know who I am now. I know that I belong. I know I do because I am this man's daughter. It's crazy that how genetics work, but we are so much alike. We think the same. Our sense of humor is the same. So I'm in this house with my mother and stepfather who are making me feel like the mistake and the accident that they said I was. I feel like an alien. Like I don't even know who I am. I don't belong here. I was, given to the wrong mother at the hospital. And I meet this man and he immediately makes sense of everything in my life. He is my father. But the problem was my mother wouldn't allow that to happen. She saw the connection, the immediate connection that was made. And again, it was the bad mouthing. She started involving my stepfather. Oh, he called the house, my biological father. He called the house and he hit on me. He's trying to get back with me, she would tell my stepfather, which was not true. Um, but it was just silly things like that they were making me feel badly. They were making me feel guilty. I was told I was disloyal because my stepfather was paying for the roof over my head. He was paying for the food that I was eating. And this is literally what I was told. I should be more grateful to him for feeding me, sheltering me, and clothing me than to a man who hadn't done any of that. And all I knew in my head was like, I remember the movie, Annie. I always envisioned, like, I wish I was Annie. I wish I could just go live in Miss Hannigan's orphanage and for Daddy Warbucks to come and save me. And we could tap dance down the steps in his tuxedo and my little red dress and we'd be good. But that never happened. It was easier for me to just cut ties with my biological father than to endure I was constantly berated for having any relationship with him at all. I'm just fortunate that he understood and respected the space that I had to put between us. And so we reconnected when I was an adult in my 20s. And, it's just interesting for all the things that were said about him that I have now know are not true. And because I've met, I know people that knew both of them and the circumstances of my conception, but my mother to this day will say, I don't know if I can say this out loud, but she's now claiming, and I'm 49 years old, she now claims that he raped her, and that's how I was conceived, and that's why she could never love me. And she has nothing to do with me, hasn't had contact with me for years. Yet my biological father never wavered, never wavered, never, I can honestly say, never spoke one bad word about my mother, never said anything about, he's never spoken an unkind word to me. He opens doors for me. He walks me in and out of, events and gatherings and whatever. He messages me every single day to make sure I'm okay. This man is a father, and he wasn't given the opportunity to be my father when I really needed a father, which was when I was a kid. So I'm grateful for who he is to me now, but it's just really disgusting to me just to see that my mother intentionally and my stepfather intentionally, two grown people, intentionally skewed my vision of him and my ideas about him to manipulate me against him, when really I would have had such a better life if he had been the one to raise me and if I had been with him instead of them.
No, there's some things that you said in there that definitely resonated. You know, the connection with your father, the DNA, feeling how y'all resonated with each other just after the
Yeah.
that I reconnected with my dad when I was 19. And to be honest, my dad is the reason why I ended up getting kicked out of the house or running away, however you want to see it. Um, and I remember the day that it happened. It was Memorial Day, and it was right after I had left 8th grade and was going to high school, and I didn't have a chance to choose what high school I was going to go to at that point in time, and I didn't. So we had so at the time, it was the big three schools in Detroit that you can go to, and you had to test into. Well, I didn't test into any of them, so I had to go to the neighborhood school because that's just how the rules had played out. And I was in the kitchen or whatever. I had told my mom I had went to go see my dad because my auntie, he actually lived down the street from my auntie's house. So my auntie was like, "Hey, I ran into your dad." I said, "Oh," I said, "Cool," I haven't seen him since the guest outfit incident. So I ain't seen him in a while, and she was like, "Well, he told me, if I ever had you, I could take you over there." And I said, "All right, cool." So we went over there, visited him, found out where he stayed at. Hung out, had some conversation. Like, well, this is my house. Come over. When you get a chance. I'm like, all right, cool. School ends and everything. Go back home, and um, I'm in there. Making. I don't think I was making something to eat or washing dishes or whatever like that. And after I had told my mom about it, and I'm thinking my mom was going to keep this conversation between us, but she didn't. She had told my stepdad. And what ended up happening is I'm in the kitchen. He picks up the phone. Now this is a time where if a lot of the Gen Z don't understand this. This is when phones were corded and hung on walls. Those things did happen. Okay, there were cordless phones, and then there was phones that hung on walls with cords. So I remember opening the refrigerator, turning around, and then a phone came and hit me right in the face.
Mm.
And I had the mark like on my face for like years after it happened. And but before that happened, he had asked me like, "Do you understand what Memorial Day is about?" And I said, celebrating whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, you know. And then he with the phone, and because my mom was in the bedroom, hit me with the phone, and I end up darting out of because he tried to grab me, so I ended up darting out of thing. And just to kind of give you an idea of why I darted, I was about like 14, 15, and I was probably about 110 pounds.
Hmm.
Okay, and my stepdad was like 6'3", 250, 280 pounds.
Ooh,
Whatever was going to happen,
you
I
weren't
probably
winning. Yeah.
I probably wasn't going to walk out in any of the best situation. Like just nothing. Okay, I was nothing but skin and bones. Okay, I'm a little chunkier now, but back then, skin and bones.
Yeah.
Raced out of there, and he, raced me around the dining room, the coffee table, tried to grab me, end up falling. So I end up throwing my gym shoes on, running out the door. And I had my cell phone. I left my mom there. I didn't know what warranted any of this information. Didn't know. So I got to walking, and I walked about maybe like 10, 12, 15 miles to get to my grandma's house. Now I'm on the phone. My auntie calls me, tells me that, he jumped on my mom. She over there with black eyes and everything. And I'm like, wait. I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, well, why'd you run? You left your mom behind. I'm like, well, that wasn't the first thing that was on my mind. Like, running wasn't the first thing on my mind. Like, by the time I got outside, I didn't know what else to do. Like,
Right.
I was outside. Like, I had already suffered enough abuse from this person. Like, I thought it was more so just a grudge against me, not necessarily a grudge against my mom. So I was like, well, forget it. I didn't want to come here anyway. So I went to my grandma. So I went to my grandma's house. Got to my grandma's house. Nobody was home. Nobody was there. I'm knocking on the door. It took me about 2 hours to get there. Nobody was there. Find out that everybody's around the corner. So I go around the corner to my auntie's house. Everybody over there. I see my mom. She ain't called the police. She's battered and bruised. And I'm just sitting there like, what happened? After I left, he got mad at her, jumping on her. They ended up calling the police. We ended up moving back to my grandma's house. I didn't know all that stuff was going to happen. I didn't know that this person had this particular. Well, I've heard rumors of the side that this person displayed, but my mom kept the relationship going. And even more so to when we had moved into a house, he ended up kicking in the door and abusing her while she was pregnant. And it was a daunting feeling for me because I was like, I still felt helpless to do anything in a situation. And I couldn't just do nothing but stand and watch with amongst all the other people that was watching as well. And even when I recall this stuff and have this and think about these stories, I know that before that incident I was a different type of person. During that incident, I was another type of person, and after the incident, I was another type of person.
Mm-hmm.
By the time that I rekindled everything with my dad and started to have a conversation with him about it, he was still getting mad over it. Well, why you didn't call me? Why you didn't tell me? And my only answer to him is that I didn't want my brothers to grow up without a father like I did. And he like, well, I don't care about that. I'm like, but I do, because I know what it is to grow up without a father. And I didn't want them to grow up without theirs, regardless of what he did, whether he was there, whether he wasn't. It wasn't through my conversation or my actions or my promptness to have my dad go off and do whatever that would occur or happen. So that was my piece with the whole situation, regardless of what happened. But rekindling with my dad, I think that everybody should know where they came from. I think you should know
100%.
you should know both your parents. You should know your mother and you should know your father. And the reason why I say that, I met a young lady that never met her father, and I think she knew where he was at, but never met him or never took the chance to meet him. But because of what her mom said and what she had believed that had happened for him to leave and not want to be bothered with her, she believed that it was pointless to meet him and have her life. Like, well, I don't need him. I got my uncle and got my mom. And I'm like, no, I think that you should definitely understand, even if you just go and have a conversation,
Yeah.
and it may result in nothing. It may result in nothing, but at least you can say you went and had a conversation. At least you can say you went and you had an understanding. and and you can live your and you can live your life to the fullest. You can understand that there is a half 50% of your DNA comes from somewhere else. And do you really know yourself if you don't give the other side of your family a chance? I can understand if he was locked up. I can understand if he died. But if the person is walking the earth and you can't at least just reach out and say, can we have a conversation? It's just some things I want to understand. There's not going to be a lot of truth just getting it from one side, one party. Because I can go ask my mom, hey, what happened between you and my dad?
Hmm.
Am I going to get a straight answer? Probably not. I'm gonna get a lot of attitude. Like, why you want to know that? Because
Yes.
anytime my dad name comes up, my mom does catch attitude. If it took me years before I could even say that I was hanging out with my dad to my mom, because I knew she wouldn't like it. It took years before I can invite him to his grandson's birthday party
Hmm.
because I knew my mom wouldn't like it, and she would have attitude. She would have attitudes, and as
Yes.
true as these statements are, when I start mingling in the events, she started having. You can visibly see the attitude on her face. He's married with a wife. She's married to her husband. That they've been together. Um, my stepdad since the
Hmm.
abuse stuff. So it's like, when are you ever going to get over it? I there's some people in my family I kind of admire their relationships because they were married to people, they were divorced, but when you see them today, they had conversation and joke. They can sit next to each other. There's no animosity, and my son is 18, going on 19. There's still there's still animosity in that situation. Like, well, I don't host no birthday parties from anymore, but when I did, you can see the like, my dad didn't
Oh yeah.
care. He was just like, I'm here for my grandson, whatever. But you can visibly see it on my mom's face, like, well, when did y'all start talking again? Or when, like, what does it matter? He's here for his grandson.
Right. But the difference is that you're able to put your son in a priority position. But my mother would do the same thing. It was, she wasn't going to come to, like, she actually said she wasn't going to pay for any part of my wedding if I invited my biological father. So I didn't invite him. She's not coming to my son's birthday party when he was like 2 or 3 or whatever if I invited my biological father or my siblings from his marriage, and I was never to speak his name. So it's really, really sad to me that there's people out there that think that's okay because, I was able, after everything I went through with my ex, and I am talking about, I'm going to be real with you. My ex, by the end of that 25 years, actually told our neighbors he was planning to unalive me, and he made a few attempts. Yet, when my son graduated high school, when he graduated from technical school, all of his things, I could put all that away and be in a public place with a man who did not want me alive because it was important for my son. I didn't need to have an attitude. None of that needs to be for my son to deal with. I'm not going to burden him with that. And what
Right.
pissed me off is, like you said, all the other people, like my ex husband who refused to sit with us. And he told his family, including his mother, my son's grandmother, not to come to his graduations. Nothing. None of the family came to my son's graduation parties, stuff like that. Why are you making my child suffer for something he doesn't have anything to do with? And
Right.
honestly, it has nothing to do with me either. It has to do with his father. But even still, even though after everything I went through with that man, and I mean, the abuse and domestic violence was for real with that one. After everything I went through, people always say, I can't believe you let your son have a relationship. And I'm like, you know what? I think once you get about 12, 13, 14 years old, you have your own mind about things. You can have an independent thought. And my feeling is my son's relationship with his father is none of my damn business. None of
Exactly.
my business. He can make his own assumptions or conclusions or whatever. That's for him to do. That I have no place in that. I'm
Right.
mom, and my son would come to me many times and people and, oh, you should this. You no, I said what I should do is make sure my son knows that I love him and that everything between him and I is between him and I. And every time my son approached me about stuff that his dad would say about us or whatever conflict or whatever undermining remarks, I would, my son expected me to defend myself. And I said, you know what? That's stuff between your dad and I. All you need to know is I love you. The end. And you know what? I'm always the one that's there. I'm the consistent one. I'm the stable one. I'm the one that loves that boy unconditionally. He's 22 years old now, and I stand by it. I stand by all of it. I even
Yeah.
had my ex reach out to me after years of no contact saying, oh, well, it looks like he's going to get married and start having kids soon. We should, be peaceable around each other so it's not awkward. And I mean, I just said, yeah, agree. But really, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm not the one making this awkward. You made it a little awkward when you decided you didn't want me to be alive. but, but
Exactly.
I was still the one that sat my butt there in fear, but knowing I had people around me to protect me and witnesses. But I went there and was 100% present for my child when everybody else said, oh no, this is this and this is that. And, they all had something to say about me or my ex or whatever. And that's crap. Children need to be put first. Their graduations, their birthdays, the holidays, all that, those are special days. Those are for them. They're not for us and our BS. We need to put that aside. So I'm sorry you had to endure that, but I'm a firm believer in the child should be allowed. Like I said, 12, 13, 14, you can make,
You're
your own decision about things. If you're that age or older, their relationship with their parents, their business, not yours. And it pisses me off when people use the kids as pawns or punish the kids for what the parents have done.
and you're absolutely right, and that's kind of the philosophy that I go along with. Is that when it comes to my son and his mother's relationship, I don't get involved.
Mhm.
Um, Matter of fact, I really don't like talking to her, honestly, and it's not because I have
I
any
understand.
anim- animosity towards her. Or anything like that. I just don't feel like we can have an adult conversation
Yeah,
because the way it's always interpreted. I'm thinking that I'm coming from a place of kind of like solace and calm and
right.
everything, and then 2 minutes into the conversation, I feel like the conversation has now escalated beyond a point that is, now we're not talking for a few days, and one and just to kind of give you just insight on how these conversations go, because they're funny to me. They're not funny in a moment, but they're always funny to me. So my son was looking to go get a car, and I had no problem with going to get him a car, except that I realized that my car insurance was going to escalate once he starts to get a car, and I'm not a fan of high price insurance. So I told myself, I was like, well, we're gonna have to put the car at your mom's house and use her address. Now she in Detroit. I live in the suburbs, so my insurance is cheaper because I live in the suburbs, but she lives in Detroit. So I went up to her and I came. I said, "Hey, how you doing?" I started out with pleasantries because that's how you try to make sure that the conversation is going to be a calm one. And she said, "I'm doing fine. How are you?" I said, "I'm doing good on this whatever day it was." I said, "Well, listen." I said, "Devin wants to get a car, so what we need." I said, "So do you mind putting the insurance at your house?" She said, "Yeah, that's fine." I said, "All right, cool. So we're gonna go and we're gonna look for a car and we're gonna put it at your address and everything." Somehow, in the midst of this conversation, she told me that I don't understand why you came over here with a puffed up chest. I said, "I didn't come over here with a puffed up chest. Like I exchanged pleasantries. I just asked where you gonna put the insurance at your house. That's really all I asked." "Yeah, but you came over here and you had this aggressive tone." I'm like, my tone wasn't aggressive. Like I politely I politely came over and it just kind of recapped like the conversation. Like no, are we going to do it? Because I know Devin was supposed to ask you. I didn't get a response. Was it okay? And then she started to get angry. I started to get angry. And then I said some things like, you know what? I'll just do it myself because I always do it. I always take care of it. It always falls on me. So I'll take care of it. And before the end of the day, before he got his car, end up taking care of it, and it was done. But this the same person that didn't want to put the insurance at their house was the same exact person that was trying to rush and get him to go and look and buy a car without me being present. And I'm like, well, none of y'all know anything about cars because y'all asked me to work on y'all cars. So how y'all gonna go look at a car and you know nothing about cars, but you want to rush and have him go run out here and get a car while I'm still at work? And I wanted to be there for his first purchase of a car so I could show him what to look for when he's test driving it. None of y'all know these things, so why are you trying to exclude me from the conversation in the first purchase? And she was like, well, why you want to be there so bad? So I can make sure he's buying a car that is decent and is not going to break down the first year he gets it. And those are the kind of conversations that we have. And I'm like, we can't have adult conversations. Like, once my son turned 12, 13, as you had stated, I ended up giving him a cell phone because I got tired of having to provide the excuses to him for why she wasn't showing up and picking him up on the weekends.
Mm.
You can call her yourself. He will call her. She wouldn't answer the phone. She wouldn't call back. And then when she did call back, I feel like my son kind of suffers from that whole idea of the missing parent. When the dad is not around, but the mother is, and then dad comes around, and then is overjoyed for the father and can't see all the blemishes and everything that occurs because it does happen. Even if they're a bad parent, it does happen. They put them on this high pedestal. I think that's what's happened with my son. She lies to him and give him these fairy tales and everything of what occurred and what happened. She doesn't say that they lived in a shelter. She doesn't say that's how she lost custody of him. She doesn't say any of that stuff. She said, "Oh well, I willingly gave you to your dad," but the actual exchange was that I had to pay her $100 a month just so he can come and live with me because she wasn't going to relinquish him. So you won't tell him that story, but you would tell him that they paint yourself in such a good light. And even when I had a conversation with my son to say, hey, do you want to see the court paperwork and everything? No, because I want to see my mom in the same light that she's in. I don't want to be mad at her. I don't want to hate her. But that's not getting to know who your parent is. You have to understand what her faults are to understand, how she got to where she is now. If you only see her in this very bright light, like she's this person that did no wrong, you're certain
I think he's having a hard time processing really. It sounds to me like my son, who had conflicting information coming in about both parents and didn't know what to do with it. He's trying to negotiate the experience of the parent and with the parent with what he knows and what he's seen and what he's heard. And that's a lot. And I mean, my thing was like when my son was 17 and I was going through this divorce and all this stuff was coming down, I'm like, just go be 17. Be 17, go hang out with your friends, stay out too late, drink a beer maybe. I don't care, but just be 17. You don't need to worry about this adult crap. But his father kept dragging him in. And that's unfortunately everything you just said. I wish more people would stop being so narcissistic and using children as pawns so that they look better, or keeping the other parents away so that they can, that's isolation, which is a narcissistic tactic, that, oh, I was here on your, the day you got your car, but he wasn't, so they can spin that story, or they don't care about this. That's why they're not here. And it's so ridiculous because you're basically screwing with a young person's brain. And why does anybody want to intentionally cause anybody to think badly about their parent? Because I go back to people are who they are. Their true colors will show in their actions and their words. And I think from what you're telling me, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No,
it
no.
sounds like he knows what he's saying, but that's his mother, and he's trying
Mhm.
really hard to hold on to what he wants to believe about her versus what he truly believes about her.
And that's true. And you know, and I have no quarrel with it whatsoever because I'm not in the middle of it anymore. I'm
Right.
no longer a middleman. And you know, he feel free to do whatever he likes with his they want to go on
Mhm.
trips together, y'all can go on trips. Y'all can do all this stuff. And you're 18, it's okay. It's fine. So I have a one last question for you.
Sure.
And this has been a very emotional and deep conversation, I will say. And I would say that we kind of walked somewhat similar paths.
Yeah.
And this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you because I really felt like I was like, man, I feel like she has walked a similar path to myself, and we have so much to kind of just talk and get into it about. But I also felt like this was so much awareness for other people as well.
Yeah.
But and I know that you advocate for women a lot, and that is very appreciative. And I'm advocating on behalf of man.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can definitely speak up. No matter what age you are, you can speak up.
Yes.
Um, and I I don't know if I should say this or not.
Just
Uh,
say it.
there was some footage that I had seen. I can't remember the boy band, but they were talking about the abuse they had went through with P Diddy, and I can't remember the boy band. If y'all know it, throw it in the chat. Um, but that right there shows you that regardless of what's going on, abuse is abuse, and whether it's happening to you because you want to move the ranks or whether it's happening to you because somebody just want to belittle you, abuse is abuse. And regardless of what person how much power or stature or a status a person has, you got to say something. These grown men were crying because they couldn't understand or process what they were going through because they felt like it was this was something that they needed to get through to get to stardom, to feed their families, and just look how the leverage that this one person had and what he possibly did to them. I don't know all the details. I seen it and it was a little too much for me because I was like, man, like how many men out there are holding in or suppressing
Mhm.
abuse that they have went through, whether it was from man or woman, mother or father, auntie, cousin, and it's just not saying anything and it's just suppressing it and it's affecting them externally and internally because it's manifesting its way outside of them. And I
Yes.
wanted, and I just had to mention that because it was very emotional for them, and in turn, it started to be really emotional for me because I'm like, man, like, why didn't I speak up? Why didn't they speak up? How many other people out there are living silently in this abuse and this and all in this torment, struggling? So, one thing I kind of want to ask you is what is one last piece of advice that you would give to anybody that is in a situation or have been through a situation and is trying to overcome that trauma?
Well, there's a lot there because there's a lot to it. I think the biggest piece of advice I would give is to hold on to your truth. You know what's what. Don't let anyone, whether it's society or people or whatever, don't even yourself. We doubt ourselves. We gaslight ourselves. Oh, it wasn't a big deal, or maybe I misinterpreted. No, you know damn well what happened. You feel it, like you said, at the core of your being, physically, mentally, you know what happened. And the thing is, it's not what happened, it's the effect of what happened. And if you're feeling it, it was real. and you hold on to that truth and you stand firm in your truth and you don't let anybody, even if it's everybody, you do not stand down from that. You stand firm in your truth, because the downside is the physical manifestation. I held my truth for 45 years. And since I spoke my truth, I have lost pretty much every family member almost. I still have a few left that believe me and are siding with me and supporting me, but I have been abandoned, exiled, shamed, ridiculed, all of it. But the one thing I am is I'm healthy, because all those 45 years of holding it in and not speaking my truth, the mental torment, the emotional distress manifested, and I'm going to tell people stress can kill you. I have a lung syndrome, upper airway respiratory syndrome, that is like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at once. And it is literally a result of high cortisol, which is a stress hormone, because I lived in fight or flight mode for so long and I had to suppress it. I couldn't say anything out of fear of the consequences. And when I got out of that marriage and when I cut ties with, my mother, my stepfather, my ex, all of a sudden I got healthy. I got healthy. And that's an amazing thing. My mental and physical health are not worth relationships that are poisoning me. And I will say that to everybody out there as well. So you stand in your truth, you hold on to it, don't let it go, and don't let anybody ever dissuade you, shush you, silence you in any way, or try to make you think it didn't happen or that it wasn't that bad, because it's valid. It happened and it's awful. But I am also going to say one more thing. I'm sorry, I'm a woman of many words, but I want people to know that their past does not have to define them. It was like hell trying to crawl out of that muddy rabbit hole that I found myself in after all those years. But I have been able, with very diligent and concerted effort and a lot of work, I have been able to, I am married now and I have a healthy relationship with my husband. I am assertive. I am probably a little too assertive for him most days, but I'm proud of myself because I can experience joy and happiness, and I don't let all that stuff that happened make me miserable now, because I will never say I'm a victim. I don't like that word. I'm just a human being, and I wish other people could see each other as humans, not as children, male, female, trying to overpower and control and manipulate. We're all just human, and we need to start acting like that and stop hurting each other.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you for coming onto the show. This has been an enlightening conversation. Very deep and
Yeah.
everything. Farewell fans, this has been a conversation that I know that you're going to enjoy. Rewind it back, share it. There may be somebody going through abuse that they or been through abuse, and they are looking for some kind of guidance. We don't have all the words that we can say to help somebody get through something, but a little bit of um, being able to relate helps as well, to know that you're not alone in that journey, and there have been other people that's been there. So we will catch y'all on the next recording. Peace.